Though the internal divisions within the Republican Party about potentially impeaching President Biden are becoming more apparent, at least some of the GOP's propaganda efforts are, unfortunately, successful. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, so as we've discussed in multiple videos, MAGA Republicans in the House of Representatives in particular are trying to impeach President Biden. As we've discussed in previous videos, this is unlikely. Certainly, it will not end in a conviction, but there's a very good chance that it won't even reach the impeachment level because they would need basically every vote they have, and 18 or 19 House Republicans are sitting in Biden districts, and the majority of Americans don't believe that Joe Biden has committed impeachable offenses. Okay? Now, we're going to play some clips here that kind of emphasize the division between the MAGA Republicans in the House and even, just to make it interesting, not even a sane Republican in the Senate, if there is such a thing, but a MAGA Republican in the Senate who has a division within MAGA Republicans in the House. There's like an incongruence there, okay? But then we're going to conclude with the fact that, unfortunately, despite this and despite the huge political risks to the GOP if they pursue this, at least part of their propaganda effort is successful. It's being successful according to recent polling. But first, we're going to start with Republican James Comer, who is the lead inquisitor in the House Oversight Committee in the witch hunt against Joe Biden. This is what he had to say on the Fox Propaganda Network during a conversation with Jesse Waters.
Joins me now. Congressman, when you get an impression from Democrats in the House, do you feel like they're scared of an impeachment, or do you feel like they're maybe egging you on?
I should also say this is in response, or this follows, Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania just publicly, bluntly daring Republicans to try to impeach President Biden because he thinks that the political consequences for the GOP would be severe.
Well, honestly, Jesse, I think they're egging us on because, history has shown that when Clinton was impeached, the Republicans lost the majority, and when Trump was impeached, the Democrats lost the majority.
So even Comer is aware of the political consequences. When President Clinton was impeached, Republicans suffered for it politically. I can't remember. I guess that was the case in Donald Trump was impeached in 2019, I think, for the first time. I can't remember. But yeah, so I know at least with President Clinton, Republicans lost the majority. So at least James Comer is aware of the political risks.
But what we have here, the difference between, Clinton lying about his affair and Trump having a phone call asking about corruption with Ukraine, which, by the way, did happen by Joe Biden.
By the way, as you know, complete lie. Donald Trump was impeached for a phone call in which he tried to pressure a foreign leader to investigate Trump's own domestic political enemy, and he tried to extort him into doing so by holding up congressionally approved federal aid. That was not a perfect phone call. That was not an ethical phone call. That was a disgusting criminal phone call, and Donald Trump was rightly impeached for it.
What we have here with Joe Biden is a situation where he's lied countless times about his knowledge and involvement in what is a major corruption story. I think this is the biggest corruption story that we've ever seen from a high-ranking politician in the history of America. I mean,
this is a guy in the party of Nixon and the party of Trump, and he thinks that this is the greatest corruption story from a high-ranking official in the history of the United States. Well, that's one take. That's from a MAGA Republican in the House of Representatives. Now I want to switch focus to a different chamber, but someone who is also a MAGA Republican, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who is awful. Okay, this is not a sane centrist Republican before you hear his words. And with that in mind, given how crazy his words are, or given how crazy he is, his words should surprise you here. So he is asked about the prospects of impeaching President Biden by a conservative radio host named Hugh Hewitt.
What is the evidence linking the president to Hunter Biden? I know Hunter Biden's corrupt. I know that he's an addict, and I know he's corrupt. Everyone in the country knows it. But what is the bridge to his father?
Well, the bridge would be bank records. And I was certainly frustrated. I didn't have the support of my committee members or my Republican leadership to subpoena these records. I really wish the House had already subpoenaed these things, but you do have to build a case. I mean, I understand investigations take some time, but the real evidence is going to be when you subpoena the bank records, you start seeing the flow of money out of Hunter's accounts, out of this labyrinth of different companies designed to set up, designed to launder money, and then be able to trace that to where Joe Biden got this. Plus,
So right there, that's a MAGA Republican, again, basically giving the game away. He's like, well, it would be, the evidence would be the bank records, not the evidence is the bank records, not the evidence has been established to be the bank records. It would be bank records if you had them, which presumes those bank records exist in the first place. You wouldn't be able to know that unless you had them. And since you don't have them, you can't know it, which means what you just did was a statement of faith, right? You have to build the case. Well, is the case already built or not? Well, it's not, because you don't have the evidence. You're not even sure the evidence exists. You see what I'm saying? So Ron Johnson gives the game away right there. He undercuts, he sandbags members of his own party because they're so stupid and corrupt and so hell-bent on just hurting President Biden politically. They have already made the case in terms of, or they're trying to make the case with a predetermined outcome, and they're just hoping that the evidence supports it. But it's pathetic. It is truly profoundly pathetic. But in terms of the propaganda support, the propaganda effort, at least some of it is successful. CNN's running an article on this. A majority of Americans believe that Joe Biden, as Barack Obama's vice president, was involved with Hunter Biden's business dealings. And this is really disappointing. A majority, 61%, say that Biden had at least some involvement in Hunter Biden's business dealings, even though there's no evidence for that. Even Devin Archer, the House Republican star witness, their guy, the ones they were hyping up for weeks, if not months, repeatedly said during his testimony, and we went over it in a previous video several weeks ago, he repeatedly said he had no evidence, no knowledge, and no reason to believe that Joe Biden had any involvement of or involvement with or knowledge of Hunter Biden's business dealings. The most that ever happened were phone calls over the span of 10 years, a father talking to his son, and according to Devin Archer, his knowledge, the substance of those phone calls, never discussed business. It never pertained to business or any sort of like fiduciary or commercial transaction between them. It had nothing to do with it. It was about the weather. It was catching up. It was about family issues, because it was also about the time that Beau Biden, Hunter's older brother and Joe's eldest son, was dying of brain cancer. Okay. Now, 61% say that there was some involvement in their opinion, but only 42%, a minority, said that they think Biden acted illegally, okay? And 18% saying that his actions were unethical but not illegal. So there's at least, I guess, a silver lining there, especially when you consider the 61% say that there was involvement of, but it's so sad because there's no evidence for it, right? But that's how effective the GOP's relentless propaganda machine has been in pushing that. Although I suppose, again, we can't give them full marks, because even with this relentless pursuit, they can own fewer than 50%, 42% say that Biden did anything illegal. And the majority of Americans still don't support impeachment. But here's another sobering statistic that bothers me a lot. About half feel that he has acted inappropriately regarding the investigation. 52% of the respondents believe that Joe Biden has acted inappropriately regarding his son's investigation. Doing what? What did Joe Biden do that's inappropriate? How has he acted at all? That's the frustrating thing. That's why I've said before, Republican politics is like playing a video game on the easiest difficulty with God mode enabled. It's actually testament to how genuinely terrible they are, that they don't win more often than they do, because it's just easy for them. They just lie, and there's a decent chance that lie sticks. Joe Biden hasn't been involved with this investigation at all. The fact that he's allowed it to continue is in and of itself a miracle of ethical behavior, because as the president of the United States, he could arrange for this to shut down, but he hasn't. He has allowed a Trump-appointed prosecutor to investigate and potentially indict later on this month his son. It's so bizarre. Now, I will say, according to the article here, the survey did include an oversample of Republicans in order to reach the intended the sample size, and then they actually controlled for it at the very end. So there might be something to that. Again, this is only one poll, but the point is this. Again, it comes down to the GOP being graded on a curve, the asymmetry of expectation, and just how easy it is. Like, Joe Biden hasn't involved himself with the investigation, and yet 52% in this poll think that he's acted inappropriately. 61% say he was involved with Hunter Biden's business simply because Republicans say he was but offer no proof. It's disappointing. Nowhere near as bad as it could be, because again, the majority of Americans still don't support an impeachment. The overwhelming majority still don't believe that Joe Biden acted illegally. So it's not a total success for the GOP. But anyway, I just wanted to update on that because, again, according to reporting, they're going to pursue an impeachment inquiry into the president for potential bribery. And apparently they're aware of the political consequences. So it's anybody's guess what's going to happen. But we're in for interesting times ahead. And hopefully one day we will be able to repay them in kind by targeting someone who actually deserves it, which would be Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, along with their father, Donald Trump.